All right, everyone, welcome back to Talking Soccer. I am Justin Horniger, and today we're going to attempt to wade through the muddy waters that are this Geo Ramos Gregg Berhalter discussion. So, what I want to do with this video is kind of get away from some of the BS that you might see on, say, if you've been following along with the story on Twitter. If you've been in the day-to-day trenches of it, you've seen not just the story itself, but the narrative kind of go through different levels here. So I want this to be kind of the best cut and paste video, the cut and dry video that has the facts, a little bit of opinion, and shies away from just being completely sensationalized. I wrote an article going into this on the Talking Soccer Medium publication. I will share that in the description down below. Of course, if you're not following on Medium, I would love for you to be, along with subscribing to the YouTube video and giving it a thumbs up before we get into it. So, Gregg Berhalter, for a bit of a preview into this, of course, Gregg Berhalter, the head coach of the U.S. men's national team, was speaking at a leadership conference that him and U.S. Soccer believed to be off the record, which is important to know kind of why he says this in a context. I'll go into my opinions on that later on, but on face surface, Gregg Berhalter, agreeing to come to a leadership conference, everything that we know about Gregg Berhalter, seems completely on board, and on face surface, that itself shouldn't be like a red flag or anything. Now, we can go into the footballing, into the soccer reasons why I have my issues with Gregg Berhalter, but for all intents and purposes, what we know about Berhalter is that he's a great person, a good guy. However, this was a real misstep, not just from him, from U.S. Soccer in general, I would say. But let's get into what actually happened. It's incredibly important to understand that certain aspects of this Geo Ramos discourse have been kind of completely fabricated. There are reports, some of them coming from, credible reports, some of them coming from Eric Winalda. But it was reported that there was this big Survivor style vote that happened that was 13-12. Geo Ramos got to stay. But what that is, it's just some sensationalizing on what Gregg Berhalter's actual talk was. Now, Berhalter went, like I said, under the agreement that none of this would, be with the media. None of this would be reported on. There was a person, I don't know if it's, the content creator or whoever. Like, this is not a sporting organization. This is a leadership forum that he went to. So you figure, people there making content for the forum are basing this off of, like, what CEO, what C-suite organization member, what, middle management organization member, or just somebody into marketing might come along this, see, oh, interesting, the U.S. Soccer head coach spoke at this forum. Let's see what he has to say on leadership. This wasn't meant to be a sports forum or even a coaching forum, for instance. It was more of a leadership forum, which I think is important to understand because the connotation there of what he says versus, if he was speaking to reporters, what he would say is completely different. Obviously, Gregg Berhalter has talked to plenty of reporters in the past. So an article gets posted on charterworks.com called Leadership Tips from U.S. Men's Soccer Head Coach, which also tells you that whoever kind of wrote this up as the brief of the forum doesn't necessarily have a clue that this is about to just be a complete tidal wave sweeping them up and everything. It was just like, look at these leadership tips from the U.S. Soccer Head Coach. And for the most part, it's all like kind of minute things on, how they got through COVID, leadership lessons, that sort of thing. Like how you cultivate. I coached a cross-country team. I've talked about this on the channel before, but I coach cross-country, track, and field. You are exposed to a lot of these leadership type courses, and some of it is specifically designed for coaching, and some of it is specifically designed for your industry types, your capitalists, if you will. So a lot of that is just talk on what is it like to have a team identity that you're cultivating. It's kind of an interesting article that I will post down in the show notes below, but I thought there were some interesting aspects to it. So on tough conversations as a form of caring. Something that's really important to me is honesty. And then the second thing is caring honestly. And this is all spoken also. So if it sounds like it's being written up weird, it's coming from the spoken word of Gregg Berhalter at this forum. This isn't me and my inability to speak, although some of it might be. A moment like when Timmy Weah, player, so this is also funny when you're reading it, but player Timmy Weah was hysterically crying on my shoulder. That was a tough moment, but it comes from the fact that we grew together, we bonded together, and I'm there to support my guys. And it's the same way in business. I can't imagine any type of leadership position where you don't care about the success of the employees, the well-being of your employees. For the World Cup, I flew to Italy to have lunch with Weston in Turin and flew home that night to Chicago. The gesture of being there for 4 hours at lunch with him from the United States went a long way. That's actually a really cool thing that Berhalter did. And yeah, that's wild that you just fly to Turin for an afternoon. That's the life of an international coach, I guess. But that's a cool little insight before we get into the nonsense that's about to come. But then the honesty part comes in. I don't think you sacrifice your leadership authority when you're close. I still have leadership authority because I bring honesty to them and I tell them things that they don't like to hear. You're not playing today. I know you're not going to like the decision, but here's why you're not playing. You're respecting them with the truth. When you give somebody the truth, you don't massage it. They feel you respected them. As leaders, sometimes we shy away from difficult conversations because it's harder to actually tell the truth than to just not have the conversation. So I go out of my way to have those difficult conversations, which I think is why in my kind of analysis, I talked about how I thought that Gregg Berhalter had a really good World Cup. And I think he's going to be a better club coach out of this, just, looking at the fact that he's always been a club coach, but he's learned a lot of valuable lessons here. And I think one thing that the players seem to respect him or did respect him for before this article came out, was that he was forthright, that he was telling you the truth at face value. And that's why a lot of the Geo Ramos discussion had kind of seemed really out of place for what we know about Gregg Berhalter. But this is where it really hits the road on handling difficult decisions around performance. Every day you come into the locker room and you're checking the scales to see where guys are at, to see what issues can arise. You always have to be ready to hit issues head on, using your values as filter, which is another thing in coaching, value-driven coaching. You have your set of values, you have your overall philosophy. Everything you do is centered to that philosophy, that value center you have. Example I give you, in this last World Cup, we had a player that was clearly not meeting expectations on and off the field. One of 26 players, so it stood out. As a staff, we sat together for hours deliberating what we were going to do with this player. We were ready to book a plane ticket home. That's how extreme it was. And what it came down to was we're going to have one more conversation with him, and part of the conversation was how we're going to behave from here out. There aren't going to be any more infractions. But other thing we said to him was, you're going to have to apologize to the group, but it's going to have to say more than you're just apologizing. It's going to have to go deeper than just, guys, I'm sorry and I'm prepared. I prepped the leadership group with this. I said, okay, this guy's going to apologize to you as a group, to the whole team. And that was fantastic. And the whole thing is that after he apologized, they stood up one by one and said, listen, it hasn't been good enough. You haven't been meeting our expectations as his teammate, and we want to see change. They really took ownership of the process. And from that day on, there were no more issues with the players. There might be issues with that player now, Greg. I think it's on face value what Gregg Berhalter is saying is good in that, with the coach and with the leadership team, we held this young player responsible. But the problem is that this player thought that this issue was handled in private, and then it came out later publicly in a way that was easy to identify which player you are talking about. It has then been leaked, accepted, confirmed by Geo Ramos himself that the issue was with Geo Ramos. This comes after there is a scrimmage in Qatar with a Qatari team, Al Gharafa SC, that Gregg Berhalter felt that Geo Ramos' effort wasn't where it needed to be. And I think up to this point in the story, up to this point in the narrative, you clearly see that Geo Ramos is in the wrong here. Geo was upset that he was told that his playing time wasn't going to be of import. He was then upset that he was playing in this friendly against a guitar club team, and he was letting his emotions get the best of him in a way that he clearly wasn't trying, to the point that his teammates noticed and spoke up and were angry with him about it. That lack of effort led to U.S. coaching staff wondering if he was still coming back from the injury that he's had at Dortmund, or if he was actually able to play in the tournament. That's how bad these concerns of his fitness were, because of how lackadaisical he had been on the field compared to his normal flow state. So this lack of effort continued into the Wales game, where Reina's actions, he threw off his shin guards and generally was sulking on the bench. This is in the Athletics kind of rundown of what they were told, what they've known from official sources. Reina was spoken to about his effort by team leadership. This is where Berhalter and other reports have specifically named Aaron Long and DeAndre Yevlin, being exclusively named in the Athletics coverage of this. This is the conversation that then led Berhalter and U.S. staff to discuss whether Reina should be sent home or if he could rehabilitate his relationship with the team. And that's where it spins off in a crazy world if you listen to Eric Winalda's tale, or what came out on USMNT Twitter, which was that there is this vote between the team. And for all we can say, what Geo has said, it doesn't seem like that ever happened. And I'm 100% going to believe the coach and the players over Twitter sources. So, I think you can be right in that Reina deserved criticism there. It's a young, talented player letting his emotions get the best of him. You watch Gio Reyna play, he's an emotional guy. He lets his emotions kind of run wild on the field at times too, when he's gesturing around, when he doesn't get a pass. Like, you can see that in the field. You can understand that he, plays with his heart on his sleeve, as the old saying goes. So it's right then that, this 20-year-old, this young player that you see as a core part of your group going forward, that he is criticized, that he's disciplined in some way. I'm not saying that that's out of the question. You can, say what you want to him, but the idea that this was settled in private with the team behind closed doors, that's obviously something that bothered Gio Reyna then when this gets out in the public in a way that, paints him in a bad light. And I think that's where you lose the locker room. The second that this gets made public, it's no longer a team thing, and it's now a U.S. soccer thing. So Gio Reyna, I've been alluding to it, but Gio Reyna posted a statement on Instagram. And in the statement, he said, "I'm disappointed that there is continuing coverage of this matter, as well as some highly fictionalized versions of events, and extremely surprised that anyone from U.S. Soccer men's team staff would contribute to it." So in the main statement, "I'd hope not to comment on matters at the World Cup. It is my belief that things that happen in a team setting ought to remain private. That being said, statements have been made that reflect on my professionalism and character." So that's him confirming that he was the one that these talks are about. "That being said, statements have been made that reflect on my professionalism and character, so I feel the need to make a brief statement. Just before the World Cup, Coach Berhalter told me that my role at the tournament would be very limited. I was devastated. I'm someone who plays with pride and passion. Soccer is my life, and I believe in my abilities. I fully expected and desperately wanted to contribute to the play of the talented group as we tried to make a statement at the World Cup. I'm also a very emotional person. I fully acknowledge that I let my emotions get the best of me and affect my training and behavior for a few days after learning about my limited role. I apologized to my teammates and coach after this, and I was told I was forgiven. Therefore, I shook off my disappointment and gave everything I had on and off the field from that point," which corresponds with what Berhalter says in that talk as well, that after that point, Gio was a great teammate. And that's the response you want to have from a young, talented player. He's not the first talented player to have to be talked to. He's not the first young player ever to have to be talked to. But it's the fact that this kind of moment of intimacy and sensitivity that everyone expected to be kept between them is now out in the public and on Twitter and on Instagram and on TikTok and in the public zeitgeist now. And I think at that point, you've completely lost the locker room. Was Gregg Berhalter going to come back after this as the U.S. national team head coach? Probably not for all 4 years. I think he's said himself through reports with Michael Giannone that, he misses the club game. And I think even he has acknowledged that there aren't a lot of international coaches that see successful tenures through an 8-year cycle. So I wasn't even convinced that he would be re-signing in the first place. I kind of took those rumors that he had, been in discussions with U.S. Soccer as either a red herring or something that's kind of a 1-year deal while they find the next coach, which I think is fine too. It doesn't really need to be someone. I think he would do a great job as a kind of caretaker manager for the next guy that comes in, and then he can go focus on the club game, which I think, again, he's going to be a better coach at than he was beforehand. And it's kind of a shame that Gregg Berhalter's tenure is going to end this way. He's not necessarily going to be remembered for getting this team out of the group stage. He's not necessarily going to be remembered for the guy that helped right the ship after the 2018 disaster in the dark years. 2017 and 2018 were dark years, my friends. To now have some excitement around the national team again. I don't think just any coach would be able to do that, regardless of the talent that we have as a country now, but also Gregg Berhalter was very influential in recruiting dual nationals like Serginho Dest, like Yunus Musa. And I think if you, take those 4 years out of contention, then we're in a worse spot as a federation. So you can't look past that, but it's a shame that his defining moment at the end of his tenure is going to be talking at a leadership conference, having it get out publicly because somebody ran with forum notes that wasn't supposed to run with them. But regardless or not, why was Gregg Berhalter at this leadership conference talking about the current U.S. national team? And why was he using an event that happened 2 weeks before this as a teachable moment? It's a situation that he kind of gets himself in as much as he thought it wouldn't get out to the public or back to the team. So, if it wasn't clear before this that Gregg Berhalter needed to move on, it should be crystal clear now that there just cannot be another cycle, another contract signed with Gregg Berhalter. It needs to go into motion. This idea that U.S. men's national team needs a new head coach. And this should definitely be the nail in the coffin for a guy that I think, showed himself real well during the World Cup. So anyway, that's kind of the black and white of the story. Let me know your thoughts on this down below. Are you done with Gregg Berhalter? Are you okay if he sticks around? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, if this is your first time, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give me that thumbs up if, you liked hearing me stumble over words, I guess. All right, folks, as always, thank you so much for watching, for listening, and we will talk very, very soon.